Hi, and welcome to a small, medium, at large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Heisen, bringing you intimate stories that heal. I want to thank all you listeners for supporting us, liking, sending in your comments, subscribing, and just listening to the different people that we have. We're trying to have a diverse podcast show here with people from all walks of life. So thank you for being here today. Let me tell you about our guest today. We will be talking to Rhonda. Rhonda Grant is a true Renaissance woman. She's the founder and the CEO of Standfast Homes and Grants Marple Incorporated. She's an active leader and highly regarded as an award-winning real estate professional. Abruptly, a near-death experience fractured her everyday routine, compelling Rhonda to author her book, Magical Forces Within: Extraordinary Discoveries in an Ordinary Life. This dynamic exploration of the metaphysical inspires her readers with real-life stories of transformation and enlightenment. Rhonda is a radio talk show host with Contact Talk Radio Network. Her podcast, The Rhonda Grant Show, is part of the C-Suite Network. And I want to say I was actually honored to be on her show. So this is going to be our second talk together. And today we're going to talk about Rhonda's book, Magical Forces Within, which I just finished and was fantastic. I can't wait for her to talk about it. And we're also going to talk about the special abilities that many people have and how to recognize them. She'll also maybe share some techniques she has for us or some exercises in spiritual things. So let's welcome Rhonda here today. Hi, Rhonda.
Hello, and thank you so much, Gail, for having me on the show.
I'm so happy to have you here. I have to tell our listeners, we actually met because you were watching one of our podcasts with an interview with Dean Radin. And so you found out a way to connect to me, and that's how we found each other. And when I was a guest on your show, all I kept feeling this whole time was we seem to have a lot in common. But then when I finished your book, I was like, oh my God, how could two people have so many similar things in life? So I feel like we have a lot to talk about, and I'll try not to share too many of my own stories and just let you talk. So I'd like to start off with your childhood beginning and whether there was any influence in your life as a young girl that might have affected you to research the kinds of things you're doing now in spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's interesting. Nobody has ever asked me that, Gail. And so when I was 18 months old, my father was electrocuted. And so he was killed. He was working with an electrician on a job, and it was the way the wires touched, live wires touched. The power wasn't turned off, and it was just an error that was made at that time, and it was many, many years ago. And he had a sort of like a steel thing on the inside of it, the brim of his hard hat that he had on. They did wear hard hats back then. And it was said, Joe, who was also electrocuted at the same time, him and his boss were electrocuted, fell to the ground. And my dad apparently sat up and said, "Are you okay, Joe?" He said, "Yes." And my dad lay back down, and that's when he passed. And so his mother, who is my grandmother, was a really big influence in my life. And she told me that story when I was around 9 years old. But when she told me the story, she told me how she received the message that her son, my father, had died. And she was in her living room. She was up on the ladder. She was painting her living room. And she had a feeling come over her that she knew that one of her children had passed, but she didn't know which one. And she didn't find out until later which one. And when she told me that, it was the first time that I was aware that a person could know something in their body or coming to them without somebody actually coming to tell them that something wrong had happened. And the next really big thing that she told me was that when my grandfather was ill, he was in the hospital, and we had come home from the hospital that one night, and we had knelt to say our prayers. And, you know, I was up late. I was maybe 12, and I was up till 11 or 12 o'clock at night. We just couldn't settle that night. And we were praying, kneeling at the bedside, praying and talking and talking and praying. And we heard a bump. And I became scared. And she said, "Charlie's gone." And Charlie was my grandfather, her husband, and she knew that he had passed. And I asked if I could sleep with her that night, and she said yes. And I heard the phone ringing in the night. And when I awoke the next morning, she said that he had passed in the night. So she had these special abilities that we're actually starting to find out from the person that we both know is Dean Radin, and the studies that he's doing, that this may be, and I'm sure that the reports will come out, that this isn't is a genetic thing that's
Really?
handed down
Right.
from one generation to another. And I'm not sure if it's, yeah, so I'm not sure if it's, you know, maternal or whatever. I'm just not quite sure.
When I was working with Dean at Ions, I would answer letters of people having these kinds of experiences.
Right,
And one of the common things that I found was that many people had this, but then they never shared the experience with anyone or told the
right.
story to another person
No.
or someone in the family. And it's only later down the road where they realize when they hear talks like, say, the one we're having,
Mm-hmm.
that were things that they could share, because it seems to me around death is where I see the most experiences when people have say they've never had anything psychic or whatever happened
Right.
to them, or that when the death comes, that's when they may have their first experience of either sensing the spirit of the person who's deceased or seeing them at the edge of their bed or in a
Mm-hmm.
doorway. And I think that when people like your grandma and say my grandma told us these types of stories, I think that it was sort of laying a seed or groundwork for the future things we were going to have to do. In my case with my grandma, she grew up in Poland, and everybody had typhoid fever at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember her telling me over and over this story about how her sister died of the typhoid fever, and then she got the typhoid fever. But she said, all of a sudden I was above my body and I was looking down, and I thought I
Mm-hmm.
was going to continue going up and up. And the next thing I know, I was dropped back down into my body, and I woke up and I didn't die from typhoid like everyone else had.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, only 16 years later, after she told me that story, because I was about 5 or 6, when I was 21, I was giving birth to my daughter and I was dying. And I had the exact experience she told me about. So
Wow.
I think it's what made me feel comforted instead of scared. So
Mm-hmm.
when I was being rushed to the hospital and I was out of my body and I could see everybody in the car and I could see my own body and I could say, everything's fine. It all seems fine. The baby's going to be born, but nothing would come out of my mouth. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
watching the whole scene happening. And the doctor said I was in the woods, and then I came back. And I think that because of my grandmother telling me of that possibility, I had no issue with dropping back into the body. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that these things our grandmas share with us young children are really valuable things. And it's sad when some children don't even get to grow up knowing their grandparents and getting to share those life's experiences. But what I have noticed is that in every family, when I've read these letters and things, there's always someone in the family. It's often more a woman I found than a man, but those are the people that I've spoken with. And their parent, their grandparent has come and given them information or did it in life, and then again after in death.
Mm-hmm.
But every time when I was pregnant, each time my grandmother would come to me in a dream and she'd throw fish on me. And I'd wake up and I'd say, I think I'm pregnant.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's how you knew. Yeah.
So,
Well, and it's interesting that your grandmother had a situation and then you had a similar situation, because I think I talked to you about when I was around 12, I had went out to, I was at home with my parents, and I had went out to what was the shed at the time to fetch something from the freezer. I think we had a small freezer at the bottom. But on the right-hand side, there was an oil tank with oil in it. And there were stairs down, and at the bottom of the stairs was a steel work saw that was plugged into a wall. And back then, those steel workhorses had a plug that had 3 prongs on it, but the electricity wasn't up to date. And so we only had a 2-prong to plug it in. So my stepfather bent back that 1 prong, that 3rd prong, and plugged it into the wall. And my mom kept reminding him, make sure you unplug it, make sure you unplug it. And this one time he did not unplug it. And I went out to the shed. I put my one hand on the oil tank and the other hand on that steel saw.
oh,
And
God.
I was electrocuting myself and I could not let go. And I might not have been shaking, but I felt everything was shaking. And I was making a noise for help, however that came out. And my mom opened up the shed door, the door to the shed, and said to me, "What are you doing?" And I was so terrified of her asking me that I let go and it broke
Ah,
that chain. But interesting enough is when I went back inside, I didn't retrieve whatever I went out there to get. When I went back inside, I could not stop crying. It had affected my heart. And I just kept weeping and weeping and weeping. And I had a hard time recovering from that. But isn't that interesting that my father was electrocuted? I had that situation, and you've just told me of your grandmother having a situation and you having a situation. And I find that really curious. And I think that's something you should talk, or we should talk to Dean Radin about, really. You're going to
yes.
see him before I do. But I find these things interesting enough to tell people. I mean, this is, I didn't put this in the book. I could have, but I mean, you can't put everything in a book. You got to save some stuff
The next book.
for the next book, or it doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit in, in the flow of what you're doing. And so some things just don't make it to the book.
Well, I'm glad we started off from the beginning,
Yes.
because it's nice, I like to have stories that are intimate. So that's why I always like to start with the childhood, because I know there's something in there that has to do with what we're doing today.
Yes.
So I'd like to move on to what inspired you to write this. I felt like I said, maybe I should just put my name on there, like I wrote this book, and I have written a book,
That
but
makes me feel great.
I'm just saying it's very concise and clear and organized, and I like the way you divided it up into so many chapters, so that once you stopped covering that particular thing about reincarnation or other lives or any of these different sorts of things. So I want to know what was the thing? Was it the accident? What was it that brought you to write this book? You spoke about an accident you had about 7 years ago. I don't know if that was the pivotal moment or if it happened prior to that, or what put you on this path.
That was that accident. Like, I was an enlightened being before, but I wouldn't say that I was enlightened to the point where every day I wanted to be fed. I wanted to be experience and know more about myself and more about my abilities. But when I was T-boned, it's what happened in that T-bone was that I was hit so hard that I feel, I mean, our souls have a sense of humor, I believe. And it said, I'm out of here now. Like, this is too many times. Like, she's been dying to live all this time, but I think this is it. And I felt my soul, or the spirit of who I was, being pulled out up through the crown of my head.
Mm.
And it, I really thought about that and contemplated about that after the accident. So here's the miracle. I was hit at 90 kilometers an hour, or 60 miles an hour, I guess, or 55 miles an hour in miles, and right on the driver's door. And I did not have a scratch on me. I did not have a broken bone, nothing. There was a lot to do about keeping me safe. The firefighters were in my car holding my neck. It took the jaws of life to get me out of the vehicle and transported to hospital for x-rays and all sorts of things. And it changed me. It changed how I saw the world. And I think it was the transition of my soul leaving and had to jump back in. I don't remember it jumping back in, because when you're T-boned, there's moments where you don't exist or you're somewhere else. I can't really explain that part of it, but I know that when I came back into my body, I was very different. I felt different. I saw the world differently. I kind of saw the world sometimes as this looking down, sometimes as if I was looking down on myself. And I started writing, and I was compelled to write. In the beginning, I didn't know what I was writing. I was just pulling things from my past, and I was writing some things down. But it happened so often that I realized that I was writing a book. And I'd always wanted to write a book. And I thought, this is it. But I knew that early on and had no idea the journey that this book was going to take. And I think when we talk to authors, and you're yourself, you're an author, is that after a while, when you're writing and writing and writing, is that your book kind of takes on its own personality. And also when I wrote, and I did a lot of research, but when I needed those words or those paragraphs or the filling in that I needed to round out the book, it came to me outside my conscious awareness. And I really had to pull that down, record it immediately, because it is an intuition. And I just had to record it immediately because I knew that it wouldn't be there if I wanted to revisit it again, because it's not coming back. Any of these times that I've had these wise ideas, bright ideas, if I don't write them down, they're lost forever. And I think they just go and court somebody else is what happens. And so that process was really interesting because I observed the process, because I had come to an enlightening or enlightenment or an awakening that just catapulted me forward. And I was so interested in reading as much as I could. And it didn't really matter what it was. I had an insatiable appetite for almost everything after the accident.
So it sounds, I was in a couple of car accidents myself, and one of them, when we went off a cliff, I think I was 12 or 13 years old,
Yes.
and it was up in a ski resort up in upstate New York, and they lost control of the car. And the only reason I'm alive is because it was a 1957 Chevy Bel Air. And those have so much metal in the front that when a tree finally stopped us halfway down off the cliff, that engine and that body was, if that had been a little Toyota, we would have all been gone. In those days, nobody wore seat belts, and there were no airbags or anything like that. But not one of the 6 people that were in the vehicle with us could have any memory of that. Everyone blanks out, every single person in the vehicle.
Do you know why that happens?
Well, I don't know. I have my own opinion why, which is I don't have any factual answers, but my answer is I feel that in that moment of terror that's happening, I feel that the soul leaves the body in that moment. and then it jumps back in again after the accident is completed, which is only a matter of, I don't know if it's seconds or half a minute or how long it takes for a car to go down a cliff. But not one person, all everyone remembers is the slide, the go over, and that's it. And then everyone's felt like they woke up and that they were in this accident. So I just think that something about the higher self maybe pulls us away in that moment. I'm just not
Okay.
sure, but that's what it feels like to me.
I wondered, yeah, what is that? Yeah.
But that would be, that's a good question, what we'd love to have answered, where and what happens in that moment, because in these, in these small accidents, when you just have a fender bender, nothing like that happens. But
No.
in these near death ones where you could die, it seems like it just feels like the soul just leaves and then it returns. That's my feeling. I don't know what the real thing is.
No, I think that's what it felt like to me, is that it's like, and that I was aware of it was really interesting that it was leaving. But it's like, I'm out of here. And I was like,
Right.
oh, okay.
And you to have survived all of that type of an impact. These are, I know we call them accidents, but I know that they're not really accidents. They're life-changing experiences.
Life-changing.
Yeah, because look what it did for you. It did a life-changing experience for you. And you started searching and doing more and more of what you'd already started doing, but something about that accident did something to affect you in a way that I have to laugh, because when I'm reading your book and I'm thinking, wait a minute, she's a real estate agent? How could she be a real
Yes. Oh
estate
my God.
agent?
I love it.
I'm just saying that
Yeah.
it's just so like the material and the spiritual. It's just so, and then I thought to myself, wow, that's an amazing combination.
It is. And the fact that I'm CEO of two businesses too, because I'm using my right brain and my left brain. And the more I'm doing this, the easier the transition is for me to leave our podcast, for instance, and then go and write some, like, whatever I'm doing, spreadsheets or costing out a job or whatever. I'm just able to make that easy transition. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't even make sense to me. But what I do know is that since that accident, I seem to be living a more enriched existence than I did before. Do you feel that with what happened to you?
I feel like that with all, like when people, like, I've had all kinds of different things in my life that were traumas, joys, things that give you PTSD, etc.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm grateful to all of them, because I feel they're what makes me who I am today. And they're the lessons, whatever the lessons were that I was learning. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm never sure about the karma and the reincarnation and what did we bring possibly from a last lifetime into this lifetime.
Yes.
So I just sort of accept everything that comes and try not to, like, I know that I've had situations that some people can't believe you survive emotionally or mentally after going through them. But my thing is that you go through them and that's where you learn. And that's what makes you more of a compassionate being, because you have had these experiences. Some people feel more personally victimized by the experience and they kind of get stuck and can't move on.
Okay.
So for me, all those things that had happened to me growing up opened up my psychic more, made me more of who I am, more compassionate, by having those kind of, different experiences. There's something you talk about that I experienced, and I was wondering, because you're so, the way you spoke, and I listened to your audiobook, so I loved listening to your explanations.
Oh,
So
thank you.
this was about the idea of knowing. Like when people ask me something, how do I just say, I just know. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that to the audience, about what that feeling is of just knowing.
Well, did I speak about a knowingness
Yes.
about things?
Yes.
Yeah, it's really an interesting aspect. And I think one of the things that intrigues me the most. And all of this intrigues me. My stories, what I experienced listening to you or anybody who has these. But one of the behaviors that intrigued me the most was or is sitting with someone and just speaking with them. But they have, let's say, a problem or something that they're trying to overcome. And all of a sudden, I get, and some people call it a download, and I don't believe it's a download because it doesn't come down. It just seems to be out there.
Mhm.
And it's for me or anybody who wants to take hold of that, articulate it, and help that person that's in front of me. And I'm astounded in the comfort that I'm able to give that person, but I'm also able to give them direction and let them know what's going to happen in their life and what they can look forward to. And by golly, it comes true.
Mhm.
And so that's a behavior that is intrigues me the most is that. And I think it's like a knowingness about somebody. It doesn't happen all the time. It just happens randomly. And it's not like you could ask me a question about something in your life and I could tell you the answer because I can't do that. It needs to be in a setting where everything is sort of flowing, and then all of a sudden, and then the person that I'm talking to for some reason doesn't say anything and just listens, which is odd. That part of it's odd too. And so that's the knowingness that I tend to have. But intuition, I mean, I have lots of intuition. And if I followed every single one, oh my goodness. But we don't. We don't. We go, oh, I'll remember that, or oh yes. And then later I'm like, oh my goodness, like I should have listened. I should have listened. I should have acted. I didn't. Now look the mess I'm in. Right? Now look what's happened.
Well, I always say to people, just start listening to your gut.
Yes.
And whether it's a physical feeling of like,
Yeah.
uh-oh, I shouldn't go any further, or a joyous feeling, oh, I must go right to this ocean right now.
Yeah.
And I think that the more that you acknowledge that voice from the gut, or for me, it's a voice from wherever, the more stronger and louder the voice becomes. So I think it's kind of
Yes.
quiet at first in some people when they haven't allowed it in them. They might have squelched it when they were a child, when people said, oh no, there's nothing there that you're seeing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And if they just allow themselves each time to follow that little voice becomes stronger and stronger. And that voice can protect you by saying later, you're going to be in a car accident, get ready now.
Mm-hmm.
And that has saved me a few times now in car accidents where it's moments before it's going to happen. And I see that it's going to happen. And I listen and brace and be prepared for what's going to come down. And I feel like those are the kinds of things that are very important for people to be developing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like a specific exercise, just listen to your inner voice.
Yeah. And I find the more I listen, the more it talks to me, the more guidance I have, because there is a part of us that is there to guide us, warn us, and protect us. And that's the part that we must listen to. And if we don't, it gets quieter and quieter.
I call
And
that the higher self.
the higher self, there you
I
go.
can't figure out another word, so
Yeah,
that's right.
there you go. Mm-hmm.
It's an important, and it's very, very important. There's one more thing I want to go into before before we talk a little bit about some other things in your book. I loved listening to the part in your book about numbers and
Yes.
314.
Yes.
Is that correct? And
Yes.
I was wondering if you could share some of that story with you, and that it gave me such validation for how I've been following numbers my whole life.
Fantastic.
And in fact, there's an article about me when I had opened up my own catering business in my early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And when I opened it up, I got interviewed about how did you know when you never were a chef or a cook, How did you know how to prepare food for 400 people or 200 people? Or
Yeah.
what did you do? And I said, well, I got to say, I'm not a chef and that all my food preparation has been done by numbers.
Oh.
I said, and I follow my intuition. And, and I said to them, like, I would never use 6 pounds of onions if I was making a large tomato sauce for a few hundred people. It has to be 7 onions, I said, or 5 onions. So I
Okay.
said, anytime I cook, no matter what the recipe says, I alter the number to match my number sequences that I like to follow, which are 3, 5, 7.
Okay.
So I have 9 sometimes also. And I ended up finding out later, like 9 is the Mongolian number, which I ended up becoming involved with Mongolians later. And 5 is the Huichol number. And I've been involved with the Huichol. So I felt like I've been following my numbers. And then I met actual, groups of people who that number was very significant for as well. So I loved all your 314 stories. And I know we can't tell all of them now, but
Hmm.
it's for people to get an idea that something as simple as feeling like a number is something that's going to give you a message possibly, or lead you down a path, or let you know, yes, I should have this apartment. I
Hmm.
loved your stories about numbers and how you told that. So if you could just tell a little bit
Right.
about that.
Well, that actually was written by my daughter, Dr. Brittany Grant,
Mhm.
and she uh, was born on Pi, which is 314.
Oh, so
Uh,
she's the one getting the tattoo.
so she was the one who got the tattoo. And so, yeah, so she was born on Pi, and also somebody passed. I can't remember the man's name right now. It's going to bother me after the show, but and I didn't know she was born on Pi until she came home. She was in grade 1 or 2, and she found out from her teacher that her birthday was on Pi day. And so then she started to see those numbers. My number has been 11. I lived at 11 Coleman Street, and I saw 11s often. I was working downtown on Bay Street in Toronto for a marketing and research firm as a young woman in my 20s. And one of the things that I did was filled out their bank deposit books.
Mhm.
And I made an error, and the error was 1. And that error was the difference between $100,000 and $1 million. And so when it was, so the bank caught it, but we had a Christmas party, and the man, Mr. Goldstein, he gave me a box of ones. And it was ones that you put on a house, house numbers and different things. And we just all laughed. I mean, they were so good humored. It wouldn't have mattered what I did. They just loved me anyway. And they just took it all in stride, because he knew that it would have been found out. But 1 has followed me, or 11 has followed me.
I just, some people think it's silly, but I've been doing that most of my life. And I just
Yes.
found that those numbers are very important and I listen and follow them. Or I may pick a line that has the 5 in it or whatever.
Yes.
So I
Hmm.
think, I think numbers are an important thing. Um, I was also wondering, there was something you spoke about called vibrational frequency.
Hmm.
And I was wondering if you could explain to our listeners about vibrational
Hmm.
frequency and how they can possibly change it if they want.
Hmm. That's I love talking about this. Um, the higher your frequency, and you can raise your vibrational frequency yourself if you're aware that you have a frequency to raise.
Mhm.
And so I spent most of my life at a certain frequency. If things didn't go right, I would feel down. If things went right, I felt up. But I didn't know that that had to do with a vibrational frequency that was in my body. I didn't know that. I didn't recognize that. But when you start to, and this is, this is really interesting, but when you are breathing into your heart and you can feel your heart, the size of your heart,
Mhm.
and the love that resides within, which is connected to your soul. And if you can then learn how to be in touch with the essence of yourself down to your cells in your body. And if you can, I'm starting to feel the cells in my body now because I'm talking about the cells in my body. I mean, that's how easy this can become. Your cells are talking to each other all day long. And if you tune in to the cells in your body, you'll feel those cells vibrating. It's not quite unlike when your arm goes to sleep and you get the pins and needles, but it's not like that, but it's kind of something like that to look for. When you are in tune with your body at that level, you start to realize who and what circumstances, what people raise your vibrational frequency, and those who affect it in a negative way. And when you find that out, when you're able to recognize how you're affected by other people, you can actually control your body so that you're not as affected by them. And so it's just a fascinating place to live. You probably live in the same place. I mean, we get together and we are just, our energies coalesce with one another. And we have a wonderful time together. If we're not giggling and laughing and all this sort of, like, it's not that type of thing. It's just that normal paying attention to the inside of your body that nobody's taught you to do. But when you do, you'll recognize that you have more control over how you feel and how others make you feel. And others can make you feel and give you that sense of energy. And I like that. I like being around high energy people because it also helps me raise my energy higher. And so it's the vibrational frequency, and we all have control over it.
And what about the other direction? Like, is there people that take away your vibrational frequency or lower it, or?
There used to be people who were able to, because I didn't recognize that I had control over my own, like sovereignty over my own self, right? And so I would be around people who were not in a good place, and it's heavy feeling. And I always came from a place of helping people. People said I should have been a psychiatrist or psychologist or something like that, and I would want to help them. But by golly, after a while, I just was exhausted, and
I've done a
so
lot of that.
yeah, you're just exhausted. So how I've changed it is because I'm so in touch. If those people come into my life and I'm able to help them, I help them from a different frequency. I don't help them by uh, any other way really than able to share information that I somehow have.
So instead of them draining you like it might have been in the
Right.
past,
Yeah.
instead you're able to be there and offer them something and not lose anything of yourself when you do that.
Yeah, I don't lose anything of myself. I've learned how to protect myself over this transition from the accident until now.
Mhm.
I've learned how to protect my energy. I've learned how to protect my boundaries. Boundaries are a really big thing. People don't realize that there's a boundary that people cross with you that you mustn't let them cross with you unless you give them permission.
Mhm.
And those who are all over the place, they don't even know that they've crossed a boundary with you. And you don't really have to do anything other than just have that feeling in yourself that you've protected yourself, you've protected your boundary. Some people have different motivations that you might not even realize that they have. You have to protect yourself. You have to protect your energy and those boundaries that are within that energy.
I find this such a funny conversation knowing
Do
that you're
you?
a top real
Yeah.
estate agent or real estate broker or whichever,
Yeah.
and that I went to real estate school in my 20s.
Yes.
Got all the way through the testing, did all the schooling, studied all the books. And then while I was in the room where you're doing the final test to pass, it's California, so they have
Yes.
whatever different rules. I looked around the room, and at that time, I'm not saying that's who you are, and I'm not saying
Hmm.
that's where it is and how it is in Canada, but in California, it's a cutthroat, really heavy business to be in. and everyone comes up with a shiny, happy face, but they're going to stab you in the back.
Oh.
So yeah, it's a very, they want that listing or they want to sell it or whatever the thing is. And I looked around the room and I looked at what I could become. I quit that minute and just walked out at the end of the test and said, I'm not getting my license because I could turn into one of these people and I don't want to be that.
And you don't want to be that person.
No.
And so I think with any job that can happen, going up the corporate ladder, there's a lot of cutthroat.
Right.
And I think that, with me, I've never had to be that type of person, and never wanted to be that type of person. There's money that I just don't need. You know what I mean? And so and I come from a place of helping, advising, instructing. I have a lot of knowledge, and not only in real estate, but in life. I've lived a big life, and I come from, from that place. I mean, my stepfather's a builder. And so I'm really second generation builder. And so I work with trades. I work with lads all the time. I work with the boys. I showed up this morning. I showed up yesterday morning talking with the trades, the electricians.
I love building. I don't know what you and I don't know what to say here. I build houses, but I just build them on my own with, somebody. I'm not a builder in that sense. It's not my business. But I've done a lot of building, and it's my most favorite project is building. I just love, to put up a quick house or to do a remodel or to cut off a piece and add something else. I think that your clients are very, very lucky to have someone like you to guide them when they are purchasing a home or making an investment for the future, because you're coming to them with from a higher consciousness place than, say, some of the California real estate people who were only into whatever they can do for themselves. Might not be the right place for another person, but they'd sell it to you anyway. You seem to be with ethics, and now you have your intuition and all those other things. So those would guide those people fabulously.
Well, and a background knowledge in building. And so when you're at a high level of your profession, I think that people really appreciate that, and they ask the questions and they get the answers and they refer me, and I have a team. And so I haven't, and I wouldn't have been comfortable with cutthroat type of business either. It's just not my personality. I'm softer, more giving.
Yes, and this is Canada, right? We're in Canada when we're talking about all this.
I know, and Canadians. I mean, there's a lot of different types of people and a lot of different types of professions, and you live with yourself your whole life, and to live with yourself your whole life, you want to be doing a lot of things right, and your reputation precedes you.
I think you're doing a great job in both of those worlds, from your book writing and then your career work. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the soul and what your discoveries were on your feelings about, or definition even of, what is the soul?
Well, it's a mighty big thing, the soul. When I meditate, when I clear my chakras, when I do any of those types of things, I really feel that I'm courting my soul. And when I court my soul, I feel the bigness of it. It's kind of like you don't realize how big your heart is until you start to reside in your heart. But your soul is huge. It's the energy outside your body as well. And I love taking long walks in the country. I love surrendering to my soul's journey, because a lot of people, and I'm guilty of it too, I interfere with my journey lots of times, because I have other ideas, right? We all have other ideas and aspirations and all those things. But when I court my soul and I'm really feeling the presence of it like I am right now, um, I really feel in touch with more than just this dimension, because this is just an illusion, basically, that we're living. When you look back over your day, it feels like a dream. It looks like a dream if you visualize your life. And so to me, people recognize that when they meet you. They recognize that you're more there's something there about you. It's almost like you have a secret when you're in touch at that level. Do you feel that, Gail?
Yes, because I've had this experience since I'm young of people coming up and telling me something they've never told any other person.
I know.
I don't know them.
I know.
Just met them that second. I mean, and then often the person standing next to them says to me, I've known them for 30 years and they never told me that.
I know. But it's almost like you're a magnet.
Yes.
And people are drawn to you. And I mean, I'm drawn to you. You're drawn to me because we
Absolutely.
recognize in each other what we are ourselves. And I think that's, and I mean, people want to talk to me all the time. And like, I don't have time lots of times to like have those conversations with people, but they just feel comfortable. They feel safe.
Mhm.
And they feel that you, for some reason, are their answer or have their answer. Is that how you feel?
Well, I've had the what you spoke about in the book, which was just follow your heart, or you don't know which things are going to happen for you.
Right.
And I was listening to that and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I never thought I was going to have a podcast. I've always
Oh,
reached and touched people just in the one on, like this, when I see them, or I've given talks in front of like maybe 100 people and I've touched them. And so I've had this experience through the years of being in conferences, and when I do a presentation, it's nicely received. But I never thought about doing a podcast
mm-hmm.
and how many people that would maybe even listen. And I started this in September,
Mm-hmm.
and I now have over 800 and almost 860 subscribers. And I have
Fantastic.
shows that have had 1,000 people look at the show. And I never thought that this is what I was going to do. And it was only from hiring a woman at this LITM media that I started off with, who encouraged me to do this, or I never would have done. I never thought anyone would want to hear anything I had to say. Or
Oh,
I didn't figure, why would I be interviewing people? Would they really want to be on my show?
right. I know. But
And all of this just happened.
mm-hmm. And this I find is the surrendering part.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people recognize in us what we may not see, because I was also asked to do my podcast. People see gifts in you that we might not have recognized ourselves. But I think that when we have a gift, we need to share that with the world.
And the part of the sharing, I feel that's why, like, the whole idea I had for my podcast was sharing stories that heal. I have nothing to sell. I have nothing to,
Yeah.
anything like this. But if somebody listens to our podcast together today, you and I, and they say, I'm going to try that little bit of meditation, or I'm going to
Yeah.
try that little thing.
Oh,
I have to
yes.
say, I just recently for my birthday had Mongolian shamans come and do ceremony all day here. And
Beautiful.
it had been 3 years since, because of COVID, that anybody had come here to do these sort of things. And it's in that gap that I realized how much I was missing by not remembering to pay honor to the tree, by not remembering to do ceremony for the animals. I've
Oh,
done different shamanic things helping other people, but that's different than when you're doing it not for a person, but just for the universe or nature or the sun or whatever thing that you're honoring in your ceremony.
mm-hmm.
And I have to really get it, that if I do not do some of that, if I do not do my drumming or my jaw harping or my just getting in touch with spirit, soul, whatever the word is, higher self,
Right.
that the rest of my life isn't in balance then.
Okay.
And other things start becoming stressful, or this is out of whack, or that's out of whack. My
Mhm.
body doesn't feel as good. For me as a person, I have to feed my soul and spirit with
Oh,
those
yes.
things.
Oh, yes.
And if it, and if I don't do that, when something smacks you, to make sure to wake you up to get
I
there.
know. I know.
So anyway, so it's during COVID that I realized the importance so much of the gathering with others, of, because you can do things alone,
Mhm.
but having ceremony with other people and
Yeah.
be there, and we had two different cultures at this. We had Huichol and Mongolian.
Mhm.
And there's something very important about sharing all these things with all these other cultures. And that, that some of us, you know, my father always said that when you have these gifts, you never attach money to any of those.
Mhm.
And he told me that since I was 10 or whatever. So none of my things have anything to do with trying to earn money for doing any kind of blessings or things like this.
Right.
But I have to do those things because it's important for my spiritual growth.
Oh, yeah, there you have it right there. It's your spiritual growth. And, when I look back on my journey, all the things that happened, really great things happened, really horrible things happened, right? Um, my journey got me here today, sitting in my office in Canada, talking to you, Gail, in California, that I never would have brushed shoulders with in a million years. Why is that? And I'm just thankful, grateful all the time for that I get to do this. I get to live my life as Rhonda Grant and be enriched by so many people that I've met. And I think the car accident, that last accident that I had, because I've had many odd accidents, and all of them sort of was a little waking up, waking up, waking up. And then I really woke up. I saw everything differently. And the more I saw, the more I wanted to know, or the more I knew, the more I wanted to know. And it just kept on snowballing. And here I am, an author. My life has just opened right up since then. It's a
Well,
miracle. It's almost like a miracle happened.
it, it it's all a very wonderful thing. And by sharing your story in your book, it's makes things it makes for people like me to say, oh wow, here's somebody who's had almost similar things happen in their life
It's
and
crazy.
similar experiences. And I'm finding so many people that I'm having on these shows that we do have certain things in common.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking forward to see what Dean discovers in the genome thing, or
Oh, yes.
the genetics of what goes on in that. Maybe there
Genetic. Yeah.
is some sort of hereditary something that, I know the things that happen to me are real. They're not fake or made up or any of these
Mm-hmm.
kind of things. But there's some people who view those things and think that, oh, they just made it up, or they just this, or they just that. When I
Well,
read stories like yours, everything's showing exactly how it led up to these things.
mm-hmm.
It's nothing out of thin air that just happened. You were
Right.
led down a path.
And, I never talked about any of that type of stuff to anybody. I kept all of that stuff to myself. And
Oh,
when I started writing and I realized I was going to write a book, I was actually going to write under a pen name so that I could still be in disguise and nobody would have to know that I had these special abilities, because I didn't want people to think I could read their minds, because I can't read people's minds. And I'm not a clairvoyant. I don't know things about people before they tell me. I know sometimes direction to give to somebody, but I don't know what, I don't know, like a clairvoyant would know. I don't know those
mhm.
things. When it came time to release my book, I did have the courage at that time, but all the way along, I was really worried. I wasn't scared. I was concerned if people would think about me differently because I had these abilities. And of course they do. Why wouldn't they? You can't take something like that. I can't take my book and hide it. Like after they've read it, and they know me at a deeper level. And I am a very private person. And I released a book that sort of told all. And it was scary for me. And people don't realize that it does take a lot of bravery to share your gifts with the world, because a lot of people aren't going to receive them the way you thought they did. And people are just going to welcome you with open arms and like, thank goodness, I have this too. And now I feel brave enough that I can say, I get intuitions, I have downloads, or whatever it is. And then they get to be who they are. Because when you remove the curtain or the cloak, this is the true essence of who you are. It's not like you weren't that person before, you were, but you just kept it to yourself. But now, to me, I've let the world see who I am.
You're out of the closet.
I'm out of the closet, Gail.
I feel like I'm coming out of the same closet with you.
Yeah. I know. That's how you feel.
It's one thing with your family and they see you doing all the things and they make fun of you all, like my kids make fun of me all the time. They're adults, but they make fun of anything I do. But then when I found this whole other community, I find I can have people who aren't making fun of me.
Yeah. They're not making fun of you, and they enjoy it, and they want to know, because they want to know if their experience is the same or syncs up with your experience. And it just goes on and on. And I think that, I just really feel that I'm enriched. And I'm glad that I did. And I really felt I was called to do the work that I did with my book. Mm-hmm. Those stories just came back to me as if I was living them again. And the more I took a look back over my life, the more I saw all the things that happened that is shareable. And what's better than a great story?
I wrote this 350-page manuscript because my whole life people used to say, oh, you should write a book. And I always figured they were only saying that because my stories were outrageous, but they didn't really mean it. But when I came out of Dean and Russell's office and they said, you should write a book after they first interviewed me to work with them back in 1998, I actually sat and wrote this whole book. And then I kind of worked on it for a few years, and then I just kind of shelved it. And now I brought it back out again.
Yes, good. Excellent.
And the whole point of the book was that I was hoping that if someone read the stories of the things that went on in my life and how they affected me, maybe they would go speak to someone that they had taken out of their life because they had a fight or they had some sort. So my idea was that, and it seemed like a tall order, but I was kind of hoping if you read the book, the persons would then like forgive someone and be able to heal a relationship.
Exactly.
But the process of whether it's to self-publish and then finding publishers and all those things, I didn't have the drive.
Well, and that's difficult because you're using the other part of your brain, and it is difficult. Artists live in a very different space. I would love to live in my artist brain all of the time because I'm comfortable there. I'm more creative there. And all of those things, but there's that other part that draws me, and I feel exhilarated when I go to a project or work with people, because I love people. I love being around people. And the more, when you're first a real estate agent or you're building a house, you have lots to say, you've got lots to share, but people don't want to hear that. And the more I'm in real estate, the more I don't say anything. I'm just a guide. And I'm there to answer their questions and to protect them, of course, because, that's what we do, is protect people because they're spending a lot of money. But it's just a nice place to be when you can go back and forth. And also even better when you can incorporate the part that I have, the part that you have, into other things in your life. Right? Because the people that you're going to meet in your publishing process is going to be so valuable. And that journey and that path is very, very interesting. You'll learn an awful lot, and you learn a lot about yourself too. And I think that's what life's about.
Writing it was a healing for me. It was
Oh,
very
yes.
healing to write that.
Oh, yes.
But the idea of I guess it's sort of the thing of feeling like you're selling your own life or something, like if it was someone else, I could represent them very well. I'm a very good
Yes.
salesperson.
Oh,
But
I
for
know.
myself, I can't do it.
Yeah. Well, and that's how I was, is I wondered if I could do it.
Mhm.
And I wanted to go under a different name, probably. I talked to my the person who was looking after my project. And when it came right down to it, I didn't want to. I really felt that I needed to own this. This was mine. And this was my stories. And I've had a heck of a time in my life. And they are teaching stories. And I would have given anything to have this book in my 20s, when I was having all of these sensations and feelings, and I wasn't grounded enough to work with them properly. I didn't know anybody who had these abilities, and they're really scary. I had some really scary situations that I asked for it to be taken away, because I wasn't grounded enough. I hadn't enough life experiences.
Mhm.
And then when I became more grounded, I asked for them back, and they did come back. But it wasn't until my last accident that it really opened up for me. And I was able to accept them, work with them, and teach from that place, and that's what I was thinking when I wrote the book, is that I wanted other people who may be living in a resort area that doesn't have access to a lot of other people, in order to share their experiences and get that groundedness that this is okay. And so that's kind of the reason that I also wanted to own that material.
Mhm. So it was a way of owning your gifts by being able to own the book at the same time, instead of doing it under another name.
Yes, beautifully put. Yes, thank you.
So
Mhm.
we're at our hour, and this is when I always like to,
Yeah.
'cause we're not, I find people's attention spans, an hour seems like the right amount for a show,
Mhm.
but I never am locked into it, because this is where I like to ask. Oh, there was one thing I wanted to mention. I wanted to talk just a tiny little bit about um, uh, death and the white light. And I just wanted to share a quick story about that,
Yes.
but it just happened. My Aunt Rosie, who is, I think she's close to 90. I'm not sure. I think she's 89 and it'll be 90 maybe.
Wow.
Anyway, she's up there. And I feel like of all my family members, she's my biological clone, where I look, I feel like our bodies are similar
Yes.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we almost lost her these last couple, she just got home, I think about a week ago, but it was a tough couple of weeks. And whenever anyone in my family or someone I know is going through illness or maybe can die or any of these things, I always light candles at an altar continually.
Yeah.
And I feel that I like to honor that person, and that I feel through my candles, I'm sending them prayers of love and healing. And it's not that you're going to heal the person of whatever their illness is, but that you're making them some sort of comfort
Oh,
on
yes.
an invisible level.
Oh, yes.
So,
Spiritual level.
yes. So my Aunt Rosie just got back after being in the hospital. And I spoke to her 2 days ago, because she received my when you get home care package of banana nut bread and jelly and dried fruit,
Nice.
all
Oh,
these things for her that she could eat now that everything is over. And she talked to me about her death experience, because she flatlined, and they stopped her heart. Her heart had stopped,
mm-hmm.
and she was clinically dead. And I wanted to speak to her, and she said, I have to tell you, she said, there was all this white light everywhere. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, I couldn't understand. And in my mind, I'm saying, I'm dead. Why are you trying to put more tubes and things into me?
Oh, yes.
And then she said, after that, all of a sudden she came back and she was not dead anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but she had experienced this white light. And I said to her, and she said she was thinking, should she go through the light or something like that? She said,
Mm-hmm.
what's with the light? And I had two other people in close to death and one who passed on who shared with them because they died consciously. And the mother shared it with the daughter, and the daughter shared it with us and said, please share this with anyone you know, which is the mother said, don't go towards the light as the mother was dying. She said, go through the light. Don't get involved in looking at the light, looking at the light.
Oh,
In the moment of death, when you see all that, don't get standing there. She says, just go like, and she used her hands like this to go,
oh, yeah.
go through the light.
Just go.
Yes, so I've been sharing her story because I
Yes.
feel like that came from a person who did die a few minutes after that and shared that with her daughter to tell her to tell people.
Right.
And I felt it was very important with my Aunt Rosie that I said to her, and for anyone else who's had this, is that people like you and I and my Aunt Rosie, people who have had this near death type of experience,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a preparation so that when the time comes that we are faced at that moment of death, we don't have as much fear because we've already had some of the experience.
Yes.
And it's important to, like share it with your family, tell them what you experienced, that you came back. It's, I feel like my Aunt Rosie, whenever her time does come, and I hope she lives to 100 and something,
Yes.
that she will have already had this moment of seeing the light and feeling that, wait, I'm dead now. Why are the people doing this? She will
Yeah.
know and feel more, like it's not a first time experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one of the other pluses of these things that happen to us that become trauma or frightening. They're actually wonderful teachers to prepare us because we're all going to die. I don't know anyone who's skipped that plan.
Mm-hmm. Well, our spirit,
I mean, our
will
body is going to die.
our body's going to die, and our
Yeah.
spirit will evolve, or like depending on the lessons that we've learned here in life will depend on how quickly, I guess, we come back, who we come back to. I mean, Many Lives, Many Masters, Brian Weiss, I don't know if you've read that book or not, but I think he's a clinical psychologist, and he was uh, talking with a patient, and he just kept on going, well, when was the time before that, when was the time before that? And then he ended up going back through her lives, and I think she had 86 lives or something, and then they stopped. And I remember talking with someone, and I said, I think I've been here before, and I've got a story in my book about that. And she goes, you've been here hundreds of times. And it never occurred to me. But of course, like, look at how long we've been on this earth. And so my understanding is that we come back as an more evolved soul. And I think that the more challenges that we have in our lives may be part of that, getting us on the course that we need to be on in order to share our gifts with others. I'm not sure. The jury's out, I think,
Mhm.
on it.
Well, I, I, I agree with you.
Yes.
And also having this talk with you is
Yeah.
making me feel a little more comfortable about saying, okay, well, I am like this. I mean, I just really enjoying our visit together today. So
Mhm.
is there anything you
Love
want to
it.
tell the audience, any particular exercise or thing before we sign off that might help them if they're just beginning with these kind of things? I'm definitely suggesting they either listen to your audiobook or purchase the book themselves. I
Yes.
know there's exercises in the back of the book that I did not get to because I only got to read the book, but you do have some meditations about coming home, magic within, the soul. So there are things there for the people to be able
Mhm.
to experiment with themselves. So if there's anything else you want to share about that before we close.
Yes, and I thank you, Gail. It's just wonderful. I mean, I think we could talk for a very long time about a lot of different aspects of our journeys. My favorite meditation in the book is the soul, and how to court your soul, and how to, it's a breathing exercise. I a friend of mine, and well, he's become a friend, but he's a fantastic musician. He composed the music to the part of the meditation in the book called the soul. And it's a breathing exercise, and it's breathing into your heart, because I think that once we make that journey to our heart, we're making our journey to our soul. And when we connect our physical being with our spiritual being, we will be unstoppable as a human race. It's not only going to heal us, it's going to heal our relationships around us. It's going to heal others, and people are going to love you more because you, and I said this not too long ago in a podcast, is I began to live when I fell in love with myself. I fell in love with my heart. I fell in love with my soul's journey. And I think that if we all could do that as a human race, it is just miraculous things would happen.
That's so beautiful. Thank you
you.
so much. I want to thank all our listeners today for being here with us. Rhonda's information will be in our description. You'll find her contacts, website, and information there. We really look forward to seeing you again. I don't
Thank
think
you.
this is our last discussion. I think we have more to talk about. I can come back
Yes.
on your show. You can come back
Yes.
on mine.
Exactly.
And just keep listening.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's been such a pleasure being on the other side of the mic, trading the mic with you. And I've loved it just as much as I loved having you on my show, Gail. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you sought me out and we found each other, because I only think
Yes.
more positive things will come from this.
I
So
do.
listeners, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank my family for taking care of my podcast and launching it and doing all these different things, producing it. So thank you to my daughter, Nancy. Thank you to my husband, David. Thank you to my son, Rich. You all do a great job, and I really appreciate you being there for me so that I can share all these stories that I know you're tired of hearing, but the rest of the world hasn't heard yet. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Have a great time. Bye.
Bye.